Question 22. If the price it pays for coffee beans continues to increase, the coffee shop will have to increase its prices. In that case, either the coffee shop will begin selling non-coffee products or its coffee sales will decrease. But selling non-coffee products will decrease the coffee shop's overall profitability. Moreover, the coffee shop can avoid a decrease in overall profitability only if its coffee sales do not decrease. First step, argument or facts. Clearly we have a set of facts here, but we should notice a large amount of sufficient and necessary terminology in this passage. So let's take a moment to diagram each statement in this passage and extract the pure logic out of this question. So you notice the sufficient necessary terminology. If, either, or, and only if in the last sentence. So let's diagram the first sentence. If the price it pays for coffee beans continues to increase, the coffee shop will have to increase its prices. So if introduces sufficient. So we know that if the price it pays for coffee continues to increase, then the coffee shop will have to increase its prices. So their prices will go up. Contrapositive, if they don't increase their prices, that means the price they pay for coffee has not increased. The next sentence tells us, in that case, either the coffee shop will begin selling non-coffee products or its coffee sales will decrease. Well, in what case? Well, the case that it has to increase its prices. So in the case where it increases its prices, it's either going to begin selling non-coffee products, so selling non-coffee products, or coffee sales will decrease. The contrapositive there, if it does not see a drop in its coffee sales and it does not start selling non-coffee products, then it will not increase its prices. The next sentence tells us, but selling non-coffee products will decrease coffee shops' overall profitability. So, selling non-coffee products is sufficient for decreasing the coffee shop's overall profitability. So our profitability there I use the pi sign, will go down. Contrapositive, if we do not see a decrease in profitability, then it is not the case that we started selling non-coffee products. And then the last sentence, moreover, the coffee shop can avoid a decrease in profitability only if its coffee sales do not decrease, only if we know introduce is necessary. So coffee sales do not decrease. It would avoid a decrease in profitability. So its profitability would not decrease. Contrapositive, if we do see a drop in coffee sales, then the profitability does decrease. And you should see the large transitive property that we can conclude from these individual sufficient and necessary statements, because we know that if the price it pays for coffee beans increase, the coffee shop will have to increase its prices. We then know if that happens, either it's going to start selling non-coffee products or is going to see a drop in its coffee sales. And either one of those, if you look down here to our final two principles, selling non-coffee products and seeing a drop in coffee sales, are both sufficient for a drop in profitability. So therefore, we know that either way, we're going to see a drop in profitability. So, now that we clearly understand what's going on in the passage, which one of the following statements follows logically from the statements above? Follows logically, this is a must-be-true question. looking for the answer choice that is 100% supported by the information we just encountered in the passage. So let's take a look at A. If the coffee shop's overall profitability decreases, then the price it pays for coffee beans will have continued to increase. Well, we know if introduces sufficient, so A is saying that if we see the drop in profitability, then it was because the price we were paying for coffee beans continued to increase. Notice that for me to take a drop in profitability and come all the way back here to conclude that the price I pay for coffee beans has continued to increase would be incorrect. We know don't just reverse, so A is not necessarily true and A would be eliminated. And again, just because all carrots are vegetables doesn't mean all vegetables are carrots. Clearly, that is flawed logic, so A does not follow logically from the statements in the passage. Which brings me to B. If the coffee shop's overall profitability decreases, either it will have begun selling non-coffee products or its coffee sales will have decreased. So you notice if again introduces sufficient, so B is saying if we see a drop in profitability, then it's either the case that we have begun selling non-coffee products or that coffee sales have decreased. You notice again, same problem we saw in A that we see in B. For me to take a decrease in profitability to come backwards and say it's either one of these two sufficient conditions is flawed logic. We know don't just reverse, so B would be eliminated. C, the coffee shop's overall profitability will decrease if the price it pays for coffee beans continues to increase. And again, we know if introduces sufficient. So our sufficient condition here is price it pays for coffee beans continues to increase. Then we know overall profitability will decrease. And you notice that that follows logically because having an increase or continued increase in the price of coffee beans is sufficient for coffee shop increasing its prices, which is sufficient for either us selling non-coffee products or seeing a drop in coffee sales. But again, either one of those is sufficient for a decrease in profitability, as we see here, which allows us to say 100% that if we see a continued increase in the price of coffee, then there will be a decrease in profitability. So C is 100% supported by the information in the passage. It is the transitive deduction that we were able to make by putting together all these different sufficient and necessary statements, combining them to one long chain because they clearly all linked up, and C would be the correct answer. But again, just making sure here, checking D, the price it pays for coffee beans cannot decrease without the coffee shop's overall profitability also decreasing. So we know without introduces necessary, so overall profitability decreasing also negates the other part of the statement to make it our sufficient condition. Price it pays for coffee beans cannot decrease would become price it pays for coffee beans decreases. So if we see a decrease in the price it pays for coffee beans, we're going to see a decrease in profitability. And what D is trying to make you think that because you don't have an increase in the price of coffee beans, that you do not have a decrease in profitability. But again, all carrots are vegetables. Does the fact that I don't have a carrot mean I don't have a vegetable? No, because there's other things that are vegetables in this world. And just like that, just because we don't see an increase in the price of coffee beans doesn't mean that we won't see a decrease in profitability. There could be other things sufficient for a decrease in profitability. So again, we know don't just negate. So D would be eliminated. And then lastly, just checking E, either the price it pays for coffee beans will continue to increase or the coffee shop's sales will increase. So either or, we know, pick one, doesn't matter which, it's our sufficient condition. The price it pays for coffee beans continues to increase. So negate that, it's our sufficient condition. The other part will be our necessary. The coffee shop's sales will increase. Contrapositive, if we don't see an increase in the sale of the coffee shop, then we will have an increase in the price of coffee beans. And you notice, again, does not follow. We never have an increase in the sale of the coffee shop. We only see a decrease in what we saw in the passage, decrease. Therefore, we would have to be here where we don't have an increase. But to come backwards and conclude that that means the price of coffee beans has increased, again, you notice I would be here saying that I don't have an increase in sales because there's a decrease in sales. Can't come backwards, though, and conclude that we have an increase in the price of coffee beans. Same problem in E as we saw in A and B. Don't just reverse. So E would be eliminated.